Most people believe power is demonstrated through action. They think that when someone insults them, challenges them, or tries to provoke them, they must respond immediately to prove that they are strong. But psychologically, the opposite is often true. The person who can control their reaction has already gained an advantage. Think about what happens when someone provokes you. They say something designed to irritate you, question your intelligence, criticize your character, or deliberately misunderstand your intentions. In that moment, they are not simply communicating with you, they are testing you. They want to discover what makes you angry, what makes you defensive, and what buttons they can press. And the moment you react emotionally, you reveal the answer. This is why silence can be so powerful. Silence interrupts the expected pattern. The other person expects anger, justification, an argument, perhaps even an emotional outburst. But when you give them nothing, they are forced to confront their own behavior without the reward of seeing you lose control. This does not mean that you should become passive or allow people to mistreat you. There are situations where you must speak, establish a boundary, or take decisive action. The distinction is that your response should come from deliberate choice rather than emotional impulse. There is a profound difference between responding and reacting. A reaction is immediate. It is driven by emotion. Someone pushes a psychological button, and you automatically press another button in return. A response is different. You create distance between the event and your behavior. You observe what happened, understand what the other person is attempting to accomplish, and then decide whether your attention is even worth giving. That small pause can completely change the balance of power. When you stop reacting, you begin to see people more clearly. You notice that some provocations are not about truth at all. They are attempts to gain attention. Some accusations are designed to make you defensive. Some arguments exist only because the other person needs an emotional battle. And once you recognize this, you stop treating every statement as something that requires an answer. Your silence becomes selective rather than fearful. This is one of the foundations of self-mastery, refusing to allow another person's behavior to dictate your emotional state. If someone can make you angry whenever they choose, they possess a degree of control over you. If someone can force you to explain yourself every time they accuse you, they control your attention. But if you can remain composed, observe carefully, and choose your response, or choose no response at all, you reclaim that control. The deeper lesson is philosophical. You cannot control what people say about you. You cannot control their intentions, their insecurities, or their attempts to provoke you. But you can control what you give them in return. And sometimes the most intelligent move is to give them nothing. Your greatest power is not controlling others. It is refusing to let others control you. And once you learn to control your reactions, the next lesson becomes even more difficult. Stop feeling that you must explain yourself to everyone. There is a deep psychological reason why people explain themselves excessively. We want to be understood. We want others to see our intentions clearly and recognize that we are not the person they believe us to be. So when someone criticizes us, accuses us, or deliberately misrepresents what we have done, our instinct is to defend ourselves. We start adding explanations, then more explanations. We provide evidence, context, reasons, and emotional details. We believe that if we can just find the right words, the other person will finally understand. But this assumes something that may not be true, that the other person is actually interested in understanding you. Sometimes they are not. Some people do not ask questions because they want clarity. They ask because they want access. They want to pull you into a conversation where you are constantly defending yourself while they remain in the position of judge. Once you accept that role, you have already surrendered psychological ground. Notice what happens when you stop explaining. You remove the material that can be used against you. Every unnecessary explanation creates another statement that can be questioned, criticized, distorted, or taken out of context. The more you talk, the more opportunities you give someone to challenge your words. This is particularly dangerous when dealing with people who have already decided what they want to believe about you. You cannot reason someone out of a position they adopted for emotional reasons. This is why self-respect sometimes requires silence. Not because you are incapable of defending yourself, but because you recognize that not every accusation deserves a courtroom. There is also a subtle relationship between excessive explanation and the desire for approval. When you constantly feel compelled to prove that your intentions are good, you may unknowingly be asking another person to validate your character. You are saying, in effect, "Please understand me. Please agree with my version of events. Please tell me that I am still acceptable." But the moment your sense of identity depends upon another person's approval, they gain leverage over you. A stronger position is to allow your behavior to accumulate evidence over time. Character is not established by one perfect explanation. It is established through patterns. If you are honest, disciplined, reliable, and consistent, those qualities will eventually become visible. And if someone chooses to misunderstand you despite that evidence, you must recognize the limits of persuasion. This does not mean never explain yourself. Important relationships, professional situations, misunderstandings, and genuine conflicts sometimes require clear communication. Wisdom lies in knowing the difference between clarification and self-defense. Clarify when clarity creates understanding. Explain when explanation serves a meaningful purpose. But when someone is committed to misunderstanding you, stop trying to win the argument. Let them have their interpretation. Your life does not become less true because someone refuses to understand it. And this is where silence becomes more than a communication tactic. It becomes an expression of inner independence. You no longer need every person to agree with your story before you continue living it. You do not need to explain your worth to people committed to undervaluing it. Let your life provide the evidence. And once you stop explaining yourself to everyone, you begin to understand another important principle. Not every act of disrespect deserves your attention. This is difficult because disrespect feels personal. When someone insults you, dismisses you, talks down to you, or deliberately crosses a boundary, your instinct may be to respond immediately. You want to correct them. You want them to know that you will not tolerate being treated that way, but there is a psychological trap hidden inside that instinct. The moment someone can provoke you into an emotional reaction, they have gained access to your attention. They have taken control of your mental space without having to earn it. Think about how much power attention actually represents. Your attention is the doorway through which your thoughts, emotions, and energy move. If you give it freely to every insult, every criticism, every jealous remark, and every provocation, you allow other people to determine what occupies your mind. That is an expensive price to pay for something that may not even matter tomorrow. Ignoring disrespect does not mean accepting abuse or becoming incapable of defending yourself. There are moments when a boundary must be established clearly and firmly, but there is a difference between defending a boundary and participating in an endless emotional exchange. A boundary says, "This behavior is unacceptable, and here is what I will do." An emotional reaction says, "You have succeeded in disturbing my peace, and now I need you to know how angry I am." The first demonstrates control. The second often gives control away. This is why strategic silence can be so effective. When someone expects an emotional response and receives none, their strategy loses its reward. Provocation depends upon reaction. Insults often seek emotional confirmation. Manipulation requires participation. When you refuse to participate, the dynamic changes. You also begin to see something important about human behavior. People often reveal themselves when they are denied the reaction they wanted. Someone who repeatedly tries to provoke you may become more aggressive when you stop responding. That escalation can tell you more about their motives than any explanation could. You simply observe. This is one of the advantages of emotional distance. Instead of becoming absorbed in the conflict, you become a student of it. You watch patterns. Who constantly creates drama? Who needs attention? Who becomes hostile when they cannot control the conversation? Who respects boundaries and who keeps testing them? These observations are valuable because they allow you to make better decisions about who deserves access to your life. There is also a deeper philosophical lesson here. You do not have to attend every battle simply because someone has invited you into it. Some battles are beneath your goals. Some arguments produce nothing. Some people are not looking for resolution, they are looking for engagement. And sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is simply to withdraw your participation. Your silence tells them that their behavior does not have automatic access to your emotions. That is not weakness, that is discipline. The mature person does not ask, "How do I make them regret disrespecting me?" They ask, "Why would I allow this person to determine my state of mind?" That question changes everything. Do not reward disrespect with your attention. Protect your peace, choose your battles, and let silence become the boundary they cannot cross. And once you learn not to give your attention to every act of disrespect, you reach another level of self-mastery. You stop allowing other people's emotions to become your emotions. This is one of the most subtle forms of psychological influence. People do not always control us through direct commands. Sometimes they control us simply by changing the emotional atmosphere around us. Someone becomes angry and suddenly you feel angry. Someone becomes anxious and you begin to worry. Someone becomes hostile and you immediately become defensive. Without realizing it, you have allowed their internal state to become your own. Think about how easily this happens in ordinary life. Someone speaks to you with irritation, and instead of calmly observing their behavior, you match their tone. They accuse you of something, and you immediately become defensive. They become emotional, so you become emotional. Before long, the conversation is no longer about the original issue. It has become a contest between two emotional reactions, and this is exactly where judgment disappears. When you are emotionally triggered, your perception narrows. You stop thinking about the larger situation and begin thinking about winning the immediate exchange. You want to prove your point. You want to be understood. You want the other person to feel what you are feeling. But emotional escalation rarely produces clarity. The stronger position is to create psychological distance. Instead of asking, "Why are they making me feel this way?" ask, "What is happening here?" That small shift turns you from participant into observer. You begin noticing patterns. Perhaps the person is frustrated about something unrelated to you. Perhaps they are projecting their insecurity onto you. Or perhaps they have learned that creating emotional chaos makes other people easier to control. Or perhaps they are simply having a bad day. You do not need to diagnose them. You only need to recognize that their emotional state belongs to them. This is an essential principle of personal freedom. You can acknowledge another person's emotions without adopting them. You can understand someone's anger without becoming angry. You can recognize someone's fear without becoming afraid. You can listen to someone's criticism without immediately believing it. Empathy does not require emotional surrender. There is tremendous strength in being able to remain calm while another person becomes increasingly emotional. Not because you are trying to dominate them, but because you refuse to surrender your judgment. And notice what happens when you remain calm. The entire interaction changes. The other person may expect resistance, but instead they encounter composure. They may expect you to defend yourself, but instead you ask a simple question. They may expect anger, but instead you pause. That pause gives you something invaluable: choice. You can decide whether the conversation is worth continuing. You can decide whether to respond now or later. You can decide whether the issue deserves action or simply deserves distance. This is emotional sovereignty. It does not mean becoming cold, detached from humanity, or indifferent to other people. It means understanding where your emotional responsibility begins and ends. You are responsible for your emotions. Other people are responsible for theirs. Once you understand this, manipulation becomes much harder, provocation loses its power, drama becomes easier to recognize. And silence becomes easier because you no longer feel compelled to mirror every emotional wave that reaches you. The world will always contain angry people, insecure people, jealous people, and people who want you to react. You cannot control the emotional weather around you, but you can decide whether you will carry the storm inside yourself. And once you stop allowing other people's emotions to control your own, you discover another form of power, the power of letting your actions speak for you. Most people talk too much about what they intend to do. They announce their plans, defend their decisions, describe their ambitions, and repeatedly tell others what they are capable of. There is a psychological reason for this. Speaking about our intentions gives us a temporary feeling of progress. We receive attention, recognition, sometimes even admiration before we have actually accomplished anything. But there's a danger in this. The more you explain what you're going to do, the more dependent you become on other people's reactions to your plans. Someone doubts you, and you feel compelled to convince them. Someone criticizes your ambition, and you begin defending it. Someone questions your ability, and suddenly your energy is being spent proving yourself rather than improving yourself. This is why quiet action is so powerful. When you stop announcing every move, you create space to work without interruption. You no longer need to convince an audience that your goals are worthwhile, you simply pursue them. You make mistakes privately, learn privately, adjust privately, and continue. Then something interesting happens. Results begin speaking a language that arguments cannot. If someone doubts your discipline, you do not need a speech about discipline. Your consistency demonstrates it. If someone doubts your ability, you do not need to become defensive. Your work provides evidence. If someone underestimates you, you do not need to demand recognition. Time has a way of revealing what words cannot. This is not about proving yourself to other people. In fact, that is the deeper lesson. The moment your goal becomes proving someone wrong, that person still occupies your mind. You are still allowing their opinion to determine your direction. The stronger position is to build because building matters to you. There's also something psychologically powerful about becoming less predictable. When you constantly announce your intentions, people know what to expect. They know your plans, your goals, your next move. But when you become quieter, you give yourself room to evolve without having to explain every change. You can change direction without making an announcement. You can improve without asking for applause. You can succeed without demanding recognition. This creates a different kind of presence. People begin judging you not by what you claim, but by what repeatedly appears in your behavior. And this is where reputation is really formed, not through one impressive statement, but through patterns that become difficult to deny. The person who is always talking about discipline but never follows through eventually loses credibility. The person who says little but consistently delivers becomes increasingly difficult to dismiss. There is a philosophical principle beneath all of this. Reality does not care about your explanations. You can explain your intentions perfectly, but reality measures consequences. You can describe your potential endlessly, but reality eventually asks what you actually produced. So stop spending so much energy managing people's perceptions of you. Work, improve, build, let time accumulate the evidence. And when people finally notice the transformation, you will not need to say, "I told you so." Your results will have already said it for you. Stop explaining what you will become. Become it, and let the evidence speak. And all of these ideas eventually lead to the most difficult form of power, knowing when to walk away. Because it is one thing to remain silent during an argument, it is another thing to stop explaining yourself. It is another thing to control your emotions when someone provokes you. But eventually there comes a moment when you have to make a decision. Do I continue participating in this situation, or do I remove myself from it completely? Most people struggle with this because walking away feels like losing. We have been conditioned to believe that every conflict must have a winner and a loser. We want the final word. We want the other person to admit they were wrong. We want justice to be acknowledged immediately. But this desire can become a psychological trap. If you need another person to admit defeat before you can feel at peace, they still have power over you. Real strength is different. It allows you to leave without receiving the apology, the explanation, or the recognition you wanted. Walking away does not mean you are afraid of confrontation. Sometimes it means you have evaluated the situation and realized that confrontation offers no meaningful return. Ask yourself, what happens if I continue this argument? Will anything improve? Will this person suddenly become reasonable? Will repeating my point for the 10th time create understanding? Or will I simply lose another hour of my life to something that produces nothing? These questions introduce something that emotional people often forget Opportunity cost. Every unnecessary conflict consumes attention that could have been invested somewhere more valuable. While you are arguing with someone, you are not building. While you are obsessing over an insult, you are not improving your life. While you are trying to convince someone of your worth, you are neglecting the people and goals that actually deserve your energy. Walking away is therefore not simply an act of avoidance. It can be an act of strategic allocation. You are saying, my attention has a higher value than this conflict. And once you understand that, you become much more selective about what deserves your response. There will always be people who want to pull you into emotional chaos. They may provoke you because they need attention. They may criticize you because your progress reminds them of what they have not accomplished. They may create arguments because conflict gives them a sense of control. You cannot always change these people, but you can remove their access to you. Sometimes that means ending a conversation. Sometimes it means creating distance. Sometimes it means no longer responding to messages that exist only to provoke you. And sometimes it means quietly moving on with your life. The important thing is that you do not walk away as an emotional reaction. Walk away because you have made a conscious decision. That distinction matters. If you storm away because you are angry, the conflict still controls you. But if you calmly decide that your future is more important than winning the present argument, you have changed the entire equation. You are no longer trying to defeat someone. You are protecting your direction. And perhaps that is the deepest meaning behind never react, never explain, just ignore. It is not a philosophy of weakness. It is a philosophy of selective engagement. You recognize that your life is limited, your attention is finite, and your emotional energy is precious. So you stop giving everyone access to all three. You choose your battles, you protect your peace. You let your actions speak. You remain calm when others become chaotic. And when a situation repeatedly demands more from you than it gives back, you have the courage to leave. Because sometimes the greatest victory is not getting the last word. It is walking away so completely that the argument no longer exists in your life.